Welcome everybody to Crushing Comics. I'm your host, Peter, also sometimes known as Crisis. I am so overjoyed to be joined today by a special guest who we've not seen for quite a while, Fangirl, also known as Faria. Fangirl, welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's been a year. Can you imagine?
It certainly has.
Last year we did the whole Hickman Avengers, and I personally would like to think because of us, Hickman is where he is now. It's because of us.
We can't help but attach that to why we are back here today, because right. Hickman is now writing, he's the architect of the entire X-Men franchise, which I don't know if you know this, Faria, but I have a little bit of an interest in the X-Men.
I never knew that. This is the first time I'm hearing this, that you like the X-Men. This is the first time I'm hearing this.
But actually, before we go there, I think one of the really interesting things is you are one of the most voracious comic readers I know, one of the few people who reads more comic books than me, honestly. And Hickman really shifted your whole worldview after we read that Hickman's Avengers, right?
Oh, yeah. My life changed. I started to think big. The idea of epic, the idea of big, it came after I read Hickman's work. I started with, you got me started. You actually, it's your fault. Or your credit to you. I started reading, I first read Hickman's Avengers. We read it together. Then I went on to read all of his rest of his Marvel work. Then I started to read his independent work.
Oh, and I love his indie stuff. It's right. You can't quite see it, but it's all right here.
I know. I can see mine. Yeah, I can see mine just over there. And when I got to Pax Romana, my life changed. My life, it's pretty much like Faria's life before PR, Faria's life after PR. This, my life has a shift, because Pax Romana showed me what we could be if there was no racism and sexism in this world. And I cannot get over that. I am so fucking angry. I'm sorry for cursing. I'm so angry.
Not an all ages show.
It's not. Okay, I'm so glad. I'm so angry that I am where I am. We could have been gone to Mars in 14th century.
Right, part of the concept of Pax Romana is what if there was kind of a world history without a lot of those suppressing factors?
Right.
Would more things get done? Spoilers, yes. But what I think is so interesting about that is comics can be powerful, and they can change your opinion of the world and change the way that you see things. For me, that's what X-Men has been my entire life. So here's how we got here. Faria got so hype from me and other folks talking about Hickman, who she loves, coming to write these X-Men books, House of X and Powers of X, that I got Faria for the first time in her life to buy a floppy comic book on the day of its release and read it. And that comic book was House of X #1. And her reaction was, did we say you had combusted? You were lit on fire. We're not going to talk about spoilers. No spoilers for Hawks and Pox here.
No. There's not going to be a spoiler. But
okay.
if you read Hawks and Pox, then you're going to know exactly which points. But I think it was the very first page and the very last page of Hawks 1. I got combusted the first page. Then I doused myself. I'm like, okay, calm down, Faria. And then the last page, it got me combusted again. And then I was running around. Then I'm like, okay, Faria, stop. And then I quickly sent out a tweet, a comment in the Facebook group that we're both part of, that, oh my God, I'm dying, or whatever it is and then you said, this is the best reaction ever. I'm like, we gotta do something more about this.
So here's the something more. So Faria has an awesome channel, Fangirls Assemble, where she has finally broken away from just being a guest on other people's channels, and she is doing awesome content of her own. And since I was so excited by her reaction, we've actually been doing a weekly react and also dig deep into influences show on House of X and Powers of 10, along with our very good friend Zach, who knows so much about the X-Men. He's read every Marvel comic book. I think he's up to 2008 now, from the beginning of the Silver Age. So I definitely want you to go and check that out. We're there talking about the new House of X or Powers of 10 book every week. So as soon as you're done watching this, go over there. But before you do, the thing that Faria and I, yes, and the links are below. We make things easy for you here. But the thing that, please go ahead.
No, I also want to say we're also joined by Tyler, another good friend Tyler, who's also a avid X-Men reader. So it's pretty much I feel like I am what's it call it? The Watcher, who collected all these experts into the fold so that you can do this like awesome analysis for me so I understand what's going on.
But that is where this video came from, because we realized Freya has read comparatively little X-Men, and I am one of these experts. She surrounded herself with experts. And so we wanted to do a 20 questions of X-Men, but with the spin on it being Freya's going to ask me impossibly hard stumpers, perhaps. I've not seen them. I don't know what they are.
I haven't seen your question.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Freya questions that I've always wanted to know from somebody who is relatively new to X-Men and maybe only knows them from a few things, and we'll find out what those few things are as we ask the questions. So let's actually get to the first question, because I think my first couple questions are kind of about those things. So we're going to go me, then you, okay?
Okay.
So my question number one is, what was your first exposure or awareness of X-Men? And that doesn't have to be inside comics. That could be in any media. What are your first X-Men memories?
It was the movie. The
Really?
first movie, yeah. So the thing is, like, I started watching. I watched the first movie. I'm pretty sure it was Bangla dubbed, and then I probably watched the English version, and then I became like just obsessed with this idea of like this group of superhero. Each of them has different power, because it kind of reminded me of Captain Planet.
Our powers combined.
Yeah, exactly. And then Captain Planet or Power Rangers, like, because I just like the idea of like groups, working together. And then this was kind of like that. And then I kind of started having this like, fantasies and like, writing fan fiction about being part of the school, having like, I think I picked Rogue to be my avatar, because she's like she cannot touch, because to a teenager that's like that's a very sexy thing, right? Like the angst of it all. And then I think but I think right around the time when the X2 came around, that's when I watched the animated show, only to realize I have watched them before. I just don't have memories.
Yeah, and had you seen it dubbed? Because that was a long time ago that the animated show was on TV.
Right. So I watched it dubbed because I was actually reminded about that by my mom, because my mom is like, "Oh, you used to watch that show as a kid." And I'm like, "What?" And my mom is like, "Yes." So I don't know. Like, so this is kind of like a thing. Like, it's like I remember reading Tintin. That was like one of my first earliest memory of like reading or enjoying property, like, something fictional. It's supposedly around the same time I was watching X-Men, and I have no memory of that.
So how far from you starting to read comics was you seeing X1 and X2? So X1, I think, was in like 99 or 2000. X2, I was dating my wife, so it had to be like 2002, 2003. I don't have the IMDb in front of me, but how long was it after that before you had your first issue of a comic book, an American style comic book?
Oh, you're talking about comic book, or you're talking
or a collection, or a collection. No, any.
Oh, okay. So I read my first ever American comic book that is not Tintin. I think around the time when Batman Begins came around. I read the Dark. Which was the one? The Frank Miller. Not Frank Miller. Alan Moore. No. Alan Moore.
Last Laugh.
Yeah, the one where
I don't know. You're asking me to care about DC Comics.
Killing Joke. Yes, the Killing Joke. So that was like the first comic I read back in like right after watching Batman Begins. I'm like, and then
so now you were aware of the X-Men. You were now aware of comic books. How long was it before you actually encountered an X-Man in a comic book?
That would be. Hang on. I'm trying to remember, because I think so. One of two options. I have to correct, I have to get back, but it has to be one of two. I'm pretty sure I encountered first actual X-Men comic X-Men, Ultimate Marvel, because I read entirety of Ultimate Marvel. I have read every single issue of Ultimate Marvel, which is probably the worst thing you can do to yourself. But I've done that to myself.
I'm very sorry, but congratulations also.
Yeah, I didn't know any better. And I think at some point after that, also because I didn't know any better, I read Avengers vs. X-Men without ever reading any of the other Marvel books, and I really enjoyed it.
Wow, I can't even contemplate that being a first comic book of X-Men. Wow. Okay, so now we've got kind of the baseline of you. What is your first Ask an X-Pert question for me?
Okay, so my first question, and this, by the way, was vetted by our friend Zach, and he's like, yeah, ask him this question. So either he's on your side or he's like really setting you up. I don't know.
I mean, I got one like sample question, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know how to answer this. This should be really fun. It'll be like the videos on my actual channel where I have no plan, and I just show up and I unwrap a book and I have to talk about whatever I see.
Right. So my first question was, which mutant has the most useless power?
The most useless power. Well, I think what's really interesting is that you always see certain mutants as being useless until the writer crafts the right thing for them to be doing. So, I mean, there's one that got introduced in Jason Aaron's Wolverine and X-Men, Eye Boy. And he's covered in eyes. And the eyes all see different infrared or heat vision or X-ray or whatever, which is actually really useful. But when you're kind of just like sitting on a mission in a classroom or you're on a mission in a fight and there's this person covered with eyes, it's like, okay, well, what is he going to do? But then we've had writers write him as a really essential person. Like, doesn't he have the ability then to like be an awesome shot if he can just see all of these things and he can see through where he needs to go? And so like maybe he should be more of a secret agent character. So I've always found him pretty useless. But I think that like Morrison era was really because they added so many mutants. There were a lot of mutants who just had like really dumb powers, like Beak had a beak. I think there was like a character in X-Men who like grew flowers or something. So I think those are the really kind of garden variety X-Men. But I don't know if I can think of just one who has the most useless power. I mean, in Grant Morrison's E for Extinction, it starts out with Wolverine and Cyclops picking up that guy. He's like Ugly Bill or Ugly Bob or something, and he just has 3 faces. That's his whole power. He's just grown 3 faces.
So I have read New X-Men. So New X-Men. Yeah, New X-Men is like my first ever proper X-Men book. Like, an X-Men book. God, I could not handle all the ugly X-Men. I could not.
There's a lot of ugly. There's a lot of ugly X-Men in that run.
I say that, and I said that before, and this is like I'm repeating myself. Please get ugly people off my comic book. I do not care for them.
So elitist.
Like, so like
only the pretty people can be in your comic book.
I'm so snob about that. Only pretty people. Thank you very much. Like, no ugly people. Like, get them off. So I was like, but the thing is, there is actually an answer to this. And
a specific answer? I think the guy with 3 faces is a strong nomination.
So Max Bemis wrote a book called The Worst X-Men. And the guy's power is he can only explode once. And once he does, he's dead.
All right, so my second question, I like that you're maybe going to supply the answers when I don't have the right ones. I still say 3 faces is less useless or useful than that. My second question for you, Fangirl, is, so you, as I've mentioned several times already, you read a massive amount of comics. You've read something like 1,000 more comics than me this year, and I've read thousands. But you somehow haven't intersected with a lot of X-Men comic books in that reading, aside from a few key runs like New X-Men. Why are they lower on your list? Did AVX just totally scare you away? How are you this voracious and just getting to X-Men?
So the thing is, like, I did read the New X-Men. I think that, because internet told me that's the place you go. I was very disappointed by the portrayal of X-Men or like Mutant in Ultimate Marvel. I think, like, to me, it was really gotten to a situation where it's like they're always just so sad. Like, they have all these powers and they do nothing with it. Like, they never fight. Like, they fight back. But the thing is, like, they're always kind of in a defensive instead of offensive. And to me, it always kind of annoyed me because historically they're supposed to be like, allegory for allegory for minority. So I always kind of had this idea, like, or not idea, but I had this like kind of assumption. It's like, so if they're never progressing and never be like, getting to where they need to be, what is the writer telling us? Or what is it telling us as like, that is like, you can never progress, or you're always going to be defeated, you're always going to be like, slave of the system. Is that, I don't know. And the thing is, like, the whole constant like back and forth of like, this alternate timeline, alternate reality, like, it just, I don't know, it just got to me is like, oh, they just move a lot, like, so much. And that's one of the reasons, like, you and I have this disagreement. I really liked Jason Aaron's Wolverine run from top to bottom, because I felt like that was one where Wolverine got to progress as a person. He got to, shine, like, become the leader that Xavier wanted him to be. But I don't know, it's just like everyone else is kind of like just stuck. It always felt that way. And this is maybe I'm being like, especially with the No More Mutant with the House of M. I mean, I did read House of M and I really liked it. The whole idea of like, oh, all the mutants are dead. And then the devastated situation that they were in. It's just, to me, it's like, I'm really not interested in this.
Well, there's a really interesting parallel, I think, there between real world systemic issues that affect people who are minorities in any way, minorities by gender, by race or ethnicity, by their sexual orientation, which is that if it's always being framed by the majority and it's always being framed as the something problem, then you're just seen as a problem. Like if every social program is there to fix your problem and every benefit is to help the XYZ problem, then the entire framing that everybody has of you is of the problem. And I'm saying this because I'm trying to learn and be open, and I'm hearing this from folks that I work with who are in those spaces. And I think you have to think about the X-Men as the mutant metaphor, that over time you have to stop always framing this metaphor that's supposed to be applied to all these real life situations as a problematic metaphor. Sometimes it's got to be about celebration. Sometimes it's got to be about growth and happiness. And that involves kind of bucking what the X-Men brand is a little bit, which is scary to people. I've seen some people say on Twitter, I asked like, hey, what do you like to see in X-Men? And some people are like, I like to see their backs up against a wall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like hasn't it been like 60 years almost of backs up against the wall? I want to see them throw a party. But I really think that's interesting from you as a newer reader to hear that reaction. Because I don't know. I think people who love X-Men love to see that stuff, but I don't understand why more people don't read X-Men. To me, it's the best comic franchise in the history of comics. And it's really interesting to hear some of that rationale.
Right, and the thing is, like, if I have to see one more X-Men where they're cornered in the mansion, and there's Sentinels that are hanging outside, and no one with all this power is not taking that Sentinel down like garbage, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm really going to lose my mind. I'm like, how is it that you have all these powers and you're doing nothing? How long is it before you can rise up and then you can say that enough is enough? You're no longer going to be doing this to us. And frankly, because the thing is, what it does then, what it teaches minorities, like, who are trying to get some kind of, inspiration from them, you are never going to win. That's the idea. That's the idea it perpetuates, that you're never going to win. No matter how much you try, no one's ever going to accept you. Which, yes, it's reality, but I am living that reality. So why do I need to experience that in the comic book as well?
That's a really interesting perspective.
It's just,
Yeah. So what is your number 2 for your X-Pert over here?
Okay. Number 2 question. Hang on. Let me remember. Okay. So, and this is most of my questions are technical. So how does
great. Awesome.
Yeah. How does Magneto's helmet protect him from Xavier? And why does not every one of Xavier's enemies wear that helmet?
Oh my gosh, these are like true stumpers. I think it's whatever metal it's made of, but it's not only what the metal's made of. I think it's like the density with which he made the metal, because ultimately Xavier is like transmitting something when he's doing psychic interactions, and so Magneto needed to make sure that he was basically, it's kind of like lead with Superman. It's not made of lead, but I forget if it's made of something special. Is it made of like vibranium or something like that? I don't know.
Well, I don't know the answer to that.
There have been times that they have made more of them. I can't think of what run it is, but I can remember a recent X-Men run. It might have been in Tom Taylor's X-Men Red, where Jean Grey shows up and she's got like 50 Magneto helmets, and it's such an awesome moment because you're like, of course she does. But maybe it was that. Sorry if I spoiled that awesome moment for you. But yeah, because I think writers have to, whenever they write one of those situations, they have to ask themselves, like, have I just ruined this for all X-Men ever? Have I established that anybody can have this helmet? And so it's got to be like a little bit rare, a little bit special. But there's also been so many cool moments where Magneto's taken off the helmet and like put it on somebody else, or they've put the helmet onto a psychic to stop the psychic from doing things. So it's like actually neat because it's not just this one-dimensional plot device that makes Magneto immune. They've actually like used it strategically, and I think that's what makes those things so much more interesting. So basically, I'm not gonna know the answer to any of these questions. I'm getting
it's fine.
Okay.
It's just like one to could discuss. So in the Days of Future Past, the movie. No, it wasn't. Sorry, X-Men First Class, the movie. Magneto takes it from the Sebastian Shaw. That's not how it is in the comic, is it?
No.
Okay. I figured. Yeah, I figured. I thought that was a pretty cool moment. He just kind of just takes it. Like, he just takes it, puts a bullet through his head, and then it's like, this is mine now. You can't control me. Fuck off. Like, I loved that moment. That's the kind of, like, X-Men moment I want. But anyway. As you can see, I'm actually going to be Brotherhood. If I was Mutant, I would have been Brotherhood.
I was thinking of asking you that, but then I was like, it is kind of obvious.
I would be Brotherhood.
I don't see Faria going to the... Well, we'll get to a question that sort of addresses that.
And if Magneto looks like Michael Fassbender, come on now.
Well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull up one of my questions I was gonna save for later because it's the perfect spot. So, based on what you know about the X-Men from all media, from TV show, movies, the comic books, but also your own assumptions about them, who is the best leader of mutants? Would it be Magneto himself? Would it be some other Brotherhood? Who would you want to go and follow if you were a mutant in the 616 universe right now?
And you said that that's across all media.
Yeah. Because the X-Men have had many great leaders. It's not always Xavier and Magneto. Cyclops has been a leader. Storm has been a leader. Jean, Emma Frost, Kitty Pryde, Wolverine. We've had a lot of Mystique on the Brotherhood side. So, Cable, who would you want to be your ideal X-Men leader?
So it kind of... So I kind of really liked Axis, the storyline of Axis between like the Cyclops and Wolverine, and I thought that was a very interesting dynamic to have. That is like past. That's the next phase of whatever Xavier.
You mean
Schism, yeah, not Axis.
Okay, Axis. Yeah, Axis is the bad.
Axis is a different one. I hated Axis. Like a Schism. You know that it's like a next phase of whatever Xavier and Magneto had. Like, you know, it's about like, okay, do we fight or do we join them or do we like, you know, coexistence versus, you know, kill them all, which I kind of agree. But no, I mean, the thing is that
time to get you a Magneto was right T-shirt. Do you need to start
Magneto
rocking?
Was right. Do you not know that Quentin Quire wears that a lot?
Yes, yeah, and he is one of your favorites. Yeah,
he is one of my favorites. I love him. So I kind of like the debate between Cyclops and Wolverine. Like, you know, that do we send the children to fight for themselves because we don't have time to teach them, or versus Wolverine's like, no, we have to teach them, which is like very... You wouldn't think that he would say that, but I can also see why he would say that, because he's been always fighting his entire life. And then I think, like, based on that, even though I can't stand Cyclops, because stop moping, my God, Cyclops, settle down. I think I would go with Cyclops.
Really? Well, then you might really like the Brian Bendis all-new Marvel Now run, which I talk a lot of shit on here and everywhere else that I can talk. But it's the one really positive quality of it is he takes the idea of like, well, what if Cyclops finally just did whatever he wanted to and stopped apologizing for it, which, to be fair, had been really set up by Matt Fraction and then by Kieran Gillen before Schism and before AVX, because there's no Xavier. They've kind of put him out to pasture and Cyclops becomes the commander. But the difference is Cyclops is a commander on the defensive in that Fraction run. The Gillen run starts to move him towards being on the offensive. And then Bendis is like, what if he really just did whatever he felt like doing? And that's where we get to this idea of revolutionary Cyclops. And I had this moment with that version of Cyclops where I was like, this is who the character has always been meant to be. This is it. So I'm kind of hoping that now that he's back in continuity and we'll see more of him, that we get a little bit more of that and he doesn't go back to like mopey Cyclops. Because I'm in peak mopey Cyclops on my X-Men reread right now because he just got married to Madeline Pryor and he is so mopey around that time. Oh God, he's
mopey Cyclops.
The mope master, mope
Mopey
king.
Cyclops is the worst. Yeah. So Mopey Cyclops is the worst. So the thing is, like, if you are into, like, you know, like if you like Cyclops, like I know, like it's the
some
idea of,
like,
yeah, some people. No, I mean the idea of baby Cyclops, like the OG5 that came back. I think that happened in Bendis' run. People have different idea about that, but his appearance in the Champions, where he was like he was just pretty much just keeping himself together and then Kamala Khan was trying to get him to loosen up, and he's like, no, I have to be like this because I can't make mistake. It will break your heart. It will absolutely break your heart.
Well, and there's another fantastic series with young Cyclops that I believe was written by
John Layman,
Greg Rucka, and John Layman. In Space. Yeah, where it's fantastic. It's amazing, and you realize that there's actually something very nuanced about the idea of the Cyclops who's seen that he grows up and his ass never unclenches. And like, does he really want to live life through the power of his Kegel exercises? I don't know, but
he talks about becoming becoming the villain. Like that's what he becomes his driver, and then Kamala Khan's like, no, it's okay. Like because Kamala Khan is like complete opposite of that, right? Like in terms of like her cheery personality and stuff. And I think they come back in Jim Jobs' latest Champions, and where it's the adult Cyclops.
There's a fantastic, probably the most exciting X-Men moment I had before the X-Men thing started was adult Cyclops coming back, and I won't spoil it.
My God.
It's either in Champions 4 or 5, and it's one of my favorite comic book moments so far this year.
It's like so having seen that and now reading the Champions, my heart is just breaking every time seeing them together, knowing their end, knowing how it's going to end for them. It's just amazing. But the thing is to answer long-winded way to answer your question, it will be Cyclops.
Wow, I did not expect that answer. So why don't we do one more from you, and then we'll be back with a part 2. So what is your number 3 question for me?
So my number 3 question for you is, what is Phoenix Force, and why does there seem to be no mutant that evolved so far to handle it?
Oh, see, this is one that I have a lot of thoughts and information on. So the Phoenix Force is ultimately one of the critically essential forces of the Marvel galaxy. Whenever they do one of these, and that wasn't always that way. So when Chris Claremont first writes it back in Uncanny X-Men, it's just this primal force of life and rebirth. We'll get into the whole Jean Grey aspect of it in a moment, but that's how he originally wrote it in the Dark Phoenix saga. It runs from Uncanny X-Men 129 or 130, depending on how you count the start, through 137, and that's the story. And it could have easily been left there, but other writers continued to pick up the Phoenix Force. And for a long time, it was just an X-Men concept. The next place it really rears its head is in Alan Davis's Excalibur, which has Rachel Summers, who's Jean and Scott's daughter from the Days of Future Past future. And she actually is a better wielder of the Phoenix Force. And we find out more, right? I'm not just doing this to give a complete history of the Phoenix, but the idea that each writer kind of dug in a little bit more to how critical it was to the idea of all life in the universe. But I think what's so interesting about what happened after Avengers versus X-Men is Avengers versus X-Men, by making the Phoenix Force central to its argument, opened up the Phoenix Force to be used by more of the Marvel universe, because previously it felt sort of editorially off limits to anything other than X-Men. But after that, then we could see other characters address it. Like, of course, Galactus has run into the Phoenix Force. Galactus is another universal constant. Of course, Eternity is aware of the Phoenix Force. So I think that since then we've seen it pop up in terms of the history of the Marvel Universe. We've seen it in Thor. I think we've seen it in Ewing's Ultimates. And it's ultimately just a cosmic force of life and balance. Now, as to why it is so attracted to redhead mutants on Earth, are we supposed to believe that they're all of the same lineage of each other? I feel like that was always the suggestion, because we had only ever really seen Jean and then Rachel Summers use it. And then there was this tease that Hope Summers was going to use it. And nobody knew who her parents were. So we were like, oh, is she like a reincarnation of Jean or something? And they finally broke out of that mold again with Avengers versus X-Men. So as much as I hate Avengers versus X-Men, the whole point of Avengers versus X-Men to me is not that it's like a hero's fight story, because who cares? But it opens up the Phoenix Force's history and its application as this universal force to be used by people other than just in Jean Grey stories. And we got many Phoenix stories, even though Jean was still dead over those few years. But I will say, anybody who wants like a deep cut Phoenix story, read Alan Davis's Excalibur from whenever he comes on, either issue 41 or 42 through issue 50 of that original Excalibur run from 1988. He does one of the best, in my opinion, Phoenix stories ever. And unfortunately, some of the things from that story have been eroded over time, just because so many other people have written the Phoenix. But that was, to me, a really great early definitive version of what the Phoenix Force was and could do. So do you have any follow-ups? That was a lot. You got me on one I really could ramble on. What did I not answer completely?
No, I think the idea of how Phoenix Force can affect you. Jean Grey by Dennis Hopeless that has a very, very good idea. Like, it tells you what Phoenix Force does to you once it leaves you. Like, I think that was done. You can look at it from two point of view. You can say that, oh, this is just a comic book with the Phoenix Force, or you can say that this is how, like, this is an allegory for depression. And then that is like, it's written because it shows like Namor, like that we, like, that we love.
That Frida loves. I mean, she loves him.
I love him. And he's like, he's yelling at everyone. Like, he's like, whatever. He's keeping it together, like how he's falling apart inside because of how Phoenix Force affects him. So I think like that's also a very good companion. Like Dennis Hopeless's like 11 issue. Very like, it's one of those saddest thing that it got canceled so early. I know.
And he didn't really get to tell the end of the story he thought he might, because they turned Phoenix Resurrection into its own thing. But I think it's really interesting because allegorically you say that the Phoenix is the power of life, and so like why would it have this ugly killer part to it? But the idea that even something that's about the force of life needs life to end for there to be more life, and so it actually really maps into that manic depressive model well, because sometimes it's about acts of creation and sometimes it's about acts of destruction. And just comic books being what they are, the destruction tends to be the story that we read about a lot because it's interesting, things get destroyed, but it's to me it's much more interesting when you get to see the Phoenix create stuff too, and that doesn't really exist in Claremont's classic run. We just see her as this planet-eating monster. She doesn't really she makes Jean stronger, but she doesn't really create anything. And it takes those later Phoenix stories to show that Phoenix Force is also a force of creation as well. So look, we have already had a half-hour discussion here, and we have a ton more questions, 14 more questions. So we're going to wrap up for this video. If you have enjoyed this repartee and you want to get caught up in the current state of X-Men, we're on the Fangirls with a Z, right? Fangirls Assemble channel, talking about House of X and Powers of X, or Powers of 10 every week. And so you can get a deep, 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 not only reaction, but discussion of the themes, the plots, how it connects to X-Men history. And I'm not the only X-Men in the room there, so you have a very nuanced view. We will be back in a week's time with even more 20 questions with an expert and, as I referred to Fangirl, a new mutant. So thanks so much for coming back to this channel, and I'm looking forward to hearing another 7 of your questions.
Oh, I cannot wait. And also to note that, like, by the time this goes out, the Powers of 10 issue 2 analysis will be also going off at the Fangirls Assemble channel. So, and then we also have all the back issue that you can look at. So head there.
And we went so deep on House of X too. We won't say why, because we don't want to spoil you if you haven't been reading it. But we went the deepest I think I've seen anybody in the internet go, honestly.
Right, and it's like 2.5 hours. Don't let that intimidate you, because trust me.
Because you can still understand us at 50% extra speed. It's fast, but you can still understand.
It's amazing. So please go to Fangirls Assemble for further details.
And we'll see you again. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Crushing Comics with Peter, your host, and my special guest, Fangirl. See you.
Thank you for having me.